Hi everyone, Jane here. Thank you so much for watching today and welcome to everybody. Today I am going to be working in the Canson art book, the one with the Saunders Waterford, and I decided that I was going to start from a focal point. I really had an urge to use something from this Wicked Personas book by Maremi. Now it was brought out as a Halloween book, but for me these images mostly, they're all year round. There's nothing Halloweeny about this little lad. He's in his mousy superhero costume and I thought he looked so cheeky, and I wanted to use the colours from his outfit as inspiration. So I'm starting out in my art book and using the Rosa Gallery watercolours. I wanted to go with the purples and oranges that are in his outfit. So I'm starting off with some violet quartz, but I didn't want to put the watercolors straight on the page. Sometimes if you feel like maybe being a little bit more experimental or a bit more abstract, then pop in your color onto something like a piece of acetate or an acrylic block, as this is a block that's meant for stamping. You pop the color on that, add some water and then put it down. Now you do get this sort of blobbiness, and I wasn't very happy with the straight edge that I got to the right. So once I'd picked it up, I went back in with the puddles that you will get when you do this sort of technique, but I wanted to just spread it around a little bit more with my brush as well, and just to get a sort of something that I couldn't have done consciously. It's totally sort of done its own thing. So I'm going back in with some more of the concentrated colour to add some darker areas. There's nothing to stop you, even if you're starting out very unconscious, to then consciously add in some extra elements. It's your page, you do what you like. And so I'm just going in with little bits and bobs of that colour, and then I will be leaving that to dry. So once that was dry, I wanted to go in with some orange. Now this is where it got a bit more tricky, because I didn't have an actual pure orange in my palette. So I started off trying to use this coral colour, which when I put it down, it didn't feel right. So I went in with what was I think it was a cadmium red, because that had a more orangey tone, and still it wasn't right. It was too red and pink. It wasn't orange. So what do you add to red to get orange? You add a bit of yellow. So I added in I think it's cerulean, I don't know if that's how you say it. Oh, that's how I say it. Cerulean yellow, and just toned that into some orange colour, and I was much more happy with this. And then because I liked that, I then did that on my block. So I mixed my cadmium with that yellow to get that orange tone, and I felt that matched the image a lot more. Sometimes when I'm art journaling, I start totally from the background and I will pick my image to go with the background. And sometimes, like this project, I start from the image. I have a very clear idea of what image I want to use, and I build that background around that. So I wanted to add some stamping into the background, starting off with colours that mixed in. So I've got Archival inks, and these are permanent when dry, so you can add watercolour over the top if you want to, or other water-based products, or water-reactive products I should say. And I picked 3 purples and 3 oranges, and I will list what I've used in the description box below as usual. The stamps I'm using are ones that I designed for Cleverprints. Unfortunately, these are no longer available unless you can get them secondhand anywhere, so I will list them, but they're not readily available anymore, as that company no longer produces stamps. And this first one is the Make a Mark set, which is like lots of backgroundy stamps. So I'm sure that you could find other stamp sets that are similar, or if not, things like using dry wall tape and bubble wrap and lids and things like that will give you the same sort of effects, because they were really designed to be that sort of grungy background. So, and they were designed, actually made with real objects to create the stamp. So, you could do it with objects as well. So I'm just going in with the tone on tone sort of look. So I've got my purples and I've got my oranges, and I want these to create a background but not stand out too much to start with. And so that is what I'm doing with those stamps first of all. So I tend to start with my lightest colour and build up to the darker colours. That way, if you start with a lighter colour and it's not quite what you want, it's not going to be so obvious if you decide that that's not what you want. if that makes sense. So I sort of build it up gradually, starting from the lighter, going up to the darker, so I know that it's as I want it. And I'm just spreading those out, and I've sort of gone for this flow starting from the top right down to the left, so I'm going a little bit outside of those watercolour marks that I've made, but sort of keeping most of it within it. And I keep putting my image back on there so I know where it's going to be, because I want some of those images to be just behind where he is, so it's like they're poking out from behind the image, because it started feeling very much like it was like a big puff of magical smoke, or some sort of potion that's gone wrong or experiment that's gone wrong, but he doesn't really mind. Then I've got these two stamp sets that I also designed. They're from a sort of a Lunar Moth little collection that I made, and I'm just picking some of those out that I'm now going to stamp in a much more dominant colour. So I'm going to use black Archival, and then I'm going to be colouring those in with my Rosa Gallery watercolours. Once that had all been left to dry, I decided that it needed a little bit of white splashes because it was feeling a little bit too dark for me, and also some white highlights. So I'm going in with my Posca pen. It's the 1M in white, and I'm just adding some little sort of dashes and dots to each of the circle elements just to give them a little bit of highlight. Then the white ink I have is the Calligraphy ink from Winsor and Newton, And this doesn't need a watering down or anything, it is an ink, and I will be using my brush just to add some splashes to that as well. I tend to start quite gently when I'm adding splashes, so you'll see I give it a really good shake. All these inks tend to need a really good shake, especially whites and golds and things, because they do settle into the components. And I just then give a little tap with my brush to start with. Then if I think, oh, actually I can go a bit further, I do. Now I'm going to add my main focal point, so I'm using my usual matte medium from Liquitex. This is the professional version. I just like this one. There are lots of different gel mediums, matte mediums, collage glues on the market, so just use what you have or whatever is easiest for you to get a hold of. That's what I would say. In this day and age, it's a lot better for me to just tell you what I use, list what I use, but then for you to find what suits you and what is easiest for you, because you know not everything is suitable for everybody. And once this again had totally dried, I'm going in with my Stabilo All Black pencil just to add a little bit of shading around the edges. And I mostly wanted to do this part at the bottom because at the moment, when I started, he was just floating, and now I want him to actually have something that he's standing on. This is just a thing that's really important to me. I really do like my images to be grounded, so I'm making sure that down the bottom there, where he would be standing and where there would be a shadow, I am making sure that is a lot darker than what I put around the edge. And I am lifting my pencil with the brush from the tip of the pencil, but I'm making sure not to get it too wet. I don't want to soak that wood and then potentially cause it to be damaged. So I'm just adding a little bit at a time. These Stabilo All pencils tend to be you know, quite intense if you put them down directly. So that's why I like to do it this way. But, you know, if you want a more intense line, that's certainly something you can do. You can put the pencil down and then water it out with your brush. So once I'd done all the shading I wanted, the final part was just to add a sentiment, and I'd already picked this one out because I thought it just suited this little character so well. So it's from the Tim Holtz label stickers, and it's the Thoughts collection. So I just was thinking where I wanted to stick it, then I just added it on with a little bit of Cosmic Shimmer glue. So thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, do please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, it would be fabulous if you could do that too. And if you see that hype button, do please hit that, because that really does help smaller creators get seen more widely on YouTube. At the end, you'll also see a list of my fabulous super supporters, a big extra shout out and thank you to those for their extra support. And until the next time, bye bye.